James here. Welcome to Walking with Disciples. This is an interesting day for us in the scheme of the church, right? In the scheme of really you and I as individuals. And I say it's an interesting day. Acts chapter 10 is today's interesting as well. Just where we're at in life, but in Acts chapter 10. I've been talking about the overarching narrative, right, of the Bible, right? This idea that as you go into Acts, it's a roller coaster ride of the story, the narrative of the early church. So, we end the Gospels with Jesus being raised again. We start the book of Acts with the ascension of Christ and telling them, hey, you guys need to wait for the baptism of the Holy Spirit, and you're going to be my disciples, and he's ascended, and then we kind of find them in the upper room, and then boom, there's this big movement, and as the Holy Spirit comes and lights on each of one of the tongues of fire. We talked about that on Sunday, right? The cloud and the tongues of fire, and they go out. 3,000 are saved, and then we got this arch, and then 5,000 are saved, and then we got another arch, and then Peter and John are put in prison, right? And arch, and another one, and then, we kind of have this movement, and then the martyrdom of Stephen happens, and what an amazing story, because that spreads the Jewish individuals that are believers, what we call Messianic Jews today, and what they would what they would call at that point the way. They begin to leave Jerusalem and go out, and so the gospel began to spread outside of Jerusalem. Again, what Jesus wanted, right? And then this new character, dun dun dun, Saul shows up, starts killing people, and he's on the road to Damascus, and we see this kind of this evil guy moving, boom, boom, boom. And the road to Damascus happens, right? And he's blind and the whole thing, right? So, and then we kind of saw the end, and we ended chapter 9 with the end of the Saul story for now, right? Saul's coming back. Right, and it get really good. But we kind of ended the Saul story, and we picked up again with Peter, who was kind of the beginning of the book of Acts. And we just talked about yesterday, the end of chapter 9, a woman named Tabitha or Dorcas, right? And just what an amazing disciple she was, and what she had done, and how important it is to have people that are the helpers, right? It tells you that she did acts of charity, right? So, this story, these climaxes, these new characters coming in and out, and then Acts chapter 10 shows up, and Acts chapter 10 for you and I should be one of the most exciting chapters in the book of Acts. Although there's a lot of really exciting ones, but exciting because this is where we get to see the switch from the gospel message, the message of Christ being Jewish only, to now going into Gentiles. And I'm going to explain a little bit more about that in just a minute. But hold on to that. So again, when we talk about chapter 10, right, we're talking about a really exciting moment in the life of you and I, what they'd call Gentiles, right? Non-Jewish believers. So let's get into Acts chapter 10, right? It says, verse 1, at Caesarea there was a man named Cornelius, a centurion of what was known in the Italian cohort. So just a couple of historical things for those of you that like the history part of this, right? So Cornelius could have just been a name for that position. More than likely, this guy was a captain of about 100 individuals. That would kind of been his area, Italian cohort, meaning that the majority of them, if not all of them, were actually from the province of Italy, right? What they would have called at that point, so they were Italian. Not necessarily now, because again, you got to understand that Rome has taken all these different countries and they brought them into one. So you would have Phoenicians and Romans, obviously Greeks, Jews, all in this thing. And so that's kind of what we know about Cornelius at this point. Again, he was a captain of about 100 individuals, right? But it goes on and it says this, verse 2, a devout man who feared God with all his household gave alms generously to the people and prayed continually to God. Now, okay, so this is an interesting piece, because what we know about Cornelius, right? What we know about Cornelius at this point is that he was a devout man who feared God with his household, gave alms generously to the people, and prayed continually to God. So again, so this is a Roman citizen, a Roman individual, a non-Jewish, but he was following God, Yahweh, right? He was following the Lord. And what's different about him, and then we go back and we talk about it like the Ethiopian, what we see differently about him, that this is the first time, Cornelius is the first time we see a Gentile, a pure Gentile who is worshiping God. And what I mean by that is that he had not converted over to Judaism at this point, meaning he wasn't circumcised, right? And he hadn't gone through the rituals to become Jewish, right? And so if we go through the Old Testament, you would see this happening, that you and I would have been allowed to, if we were circumcised and we went through certain rituals, we became Jewish in that sense, right? So this is the first time that we've really seen an individual that's not converted to completely over to Judaism, who's says that he's praying continually to God. And then verse 3, about the ninth hour of the day, he saw clearly in a vision an angel of God come in and say to him, Cornelius. And now, okay, and you guys know this, I love the ninth hour, right? Because how many things have we heard about in the ninth hour? They were Peter and John. Where were they going in the ninth hour, right? What happened with Jesus with the ninth hour? Over and over again, right? We see this. We see the ninth hour moments, and that there's stuff that happens. And can I just sidebar for a second here? You know what? It's important for you and I to pray throughout the day, and I think we've missed that. If this tells us anything, we're gonna see in a moment when Peter is praying. Tomorrow we'll talk about that. But that Peter's praying, he's also praying at a specific hour, okay? And so they had these ritual prayers throughout the day, right? The ninth hour, the sixth hour, the third, right? The morning, noon, night kind of prayers. They were continually in prayer, and it's interesting how much power and how much we see God visiting them in their continual prayer, their normal prayer life. And I wonder what your normal prayer life looks like, what my normal prayer looks like. Is it to the point where it's an opportunity for God to know that we're going to be there? Do you know what I'm saying? I'm thinking, I'm looking at Cornelius and going, God had an appointment with Cornelius at the ninth hour. He always said, okay, God's like, oh, hey, Cornelius is going to pray. It's the ninth hour. I know he's going to be there. And that gives me an opportunity to talk to him. And I think far too often our prayer life is kind of willy-nilly. It's kind of like, when I feel like it, I want to go ahead and pray. Did I get anybody there? Right? That okay, I feel up to it, or something's happened, I'm going to pray. But we don't see that with the early disciples, right? That they had continual times when they would pray. And they would say, it's the ninth hour, it's time to pray. And so I think that really speaks to us. And I hope that during these times, that's one of the things that you're learning to do, is have a continual prayer life with God. It says, it says that an angel of the Lord appeared, the angel of God appeared and said, Cornelius. And Cornelius responded, probably a lot like I would, kind of stared at him in terror and says, what is it, Lord? Now, Lord, you'll notice is capitalized, but the lowercase O-R-D. Okay, in the New Testament, you're not going to see what you'll see sometimes in the Old Testament, the capital L-O-R-D, right? That is signifying the name of God. So Lord, in this case, is not talking, though, about God. It's talking about a position, right? So this is an angel of the Lord. It is not the Lord, right? And he said to him, your prayers and your alms, and this is the angel speaking to him, your prayers and your alms have ascended as a memorial for God. Isn't that interesting that it wasn't just the prayers that really touched them, right? That touched God, but it was the alms, it was his acts of service. And we just talked about Dorcas or Tabitha yesterday, and it was the acts of service that had touched the people, the widows and the others that knew her, right? And it apparently touched God so much that he wanted to raise her back from the dead again. And then here we go, Acts chapter 10, God's like, hey, man, I received your prayers, but I also received your alms, your acts of service. Again, guys, I think we need to understand how important it is for you and I to go out and minister to people. That God looks at those and they're memorials to him. They're sweet smell to him, right? And it says your prayers and your alms have ascended as a memorial before God. And then he goes and tells them, and now send men to Joppa and bring one Simon who was called Peter. So go get Peter, right? No, so remember Peter, who just was instrumental in raising Tabitha from the dead, right? Is now back in Joppa. He says, and so he says, go. He's lodging there with a man named Simon, who's a tanner, right? Whose house is by the sea. What incredible instructions. God's like, you're looking for Simon Peter. He's staying with Simon the tanner, and he lives by the sea, right? I'm gonna help you figure out where you're going. So it says when the angel who spoke to him had departed, he called two of his servants and a devout soldier from among those who attended him, and having related everything to him, he sent them to Joppa. So, okay. Couple real quick things here, because we're gonna stop there, because I don't want to run too fast through tomorrow, right? Tomorrow we see an incredible vision that Peter gets while he's waiting for his meal, waiting for lunch, right? But I think when we understand what God is doing in this moment, he's beginning to break out of what everyone thought was the norm and how things were going to go. That again, the Jewish people were going to be the ones that received Christ, and it was going to be them as a nation. And then God's like, hey, I'm going to break out. And it's interesting to me that he utilizes and he uses this breakout moment, this game-changing moment. He grabs a Roman soldier to do it in, right? To do it with. This is a man that could be sent at any moment to war, or do anything else. He didn't use what I would have normally used, or I would have thought of as an individual. I would have grabbed a politician, or somebody that was really founded in an area, had a lot of family in an area. Do you know what I'm saying? Right? But God understands how things work. And so here we are, right? Here we are at this moment, and God's like, okay, I'm going to use somebody that prays to me regularly, that I can count on him to pray, and gives alms. Okay, and hear me really quickly. This is not about just giving money to the church. Okay, I need you to understand that alms was about giving what we have to those less fortunate, right? To help those out, the poor, the needy, the widow. What is pure religion, the widows and the orphans, right? That's what it was about. And so God is always looking. If you've been with me long enough, I'm saying that God's always looking for somebody that he can rest his spirit on. He looks and he sees this man named who was a Roman soldier, a captain of 100 individuals, and said, here's where my presence can reside, because he prays and he gives alms. So that's my challenge for you today. How often are you praying, and how often are you giving alms? So love you guys.